You know, our oceans are just immense. They're powerful, and they're the highways for pretty much everything we buy. But for the millions of people working on the ships crossing these oceans, the risks are very, very real. So how do you make sure a container ship leaving Shanghai follows the same safety rules as a tanker in the North Sea? Well, the answer lies in a single, powerful global rulebook. So let's dive into the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, or as everyone calls it, SOLAS.
Now, this might sound like a bunch of legal jargon, but it's not. This is the mission statement, right from the convention's opening lines. It's basically a promise, a pact made by countries all over the world to work together and create one single set of rules. This shared desire to save lives, well, that's the bedrock of all modern maritime safety.
So what is SOLAS, really? It was actually born from the tragedy of the Titanic, and it has since become the single most important international treaty for merchant ships. But don't go picturing some dusty old document locked in a vault. No way. This is a living, breathing set of regulations. Think of it like the ultimate rulebook for a ship's entire life, covering everything from how thick its steel plates have to be to how the crew is trained. It's the master plan for staying safe out on the water.
All right, to really get our heads around this massive topic, we're going to break it down. We'll look at how SOLAS is actually enforced, then we'll get into the ship itself, its construction and fire safety. After that, we'll cover onboard operations, how cargo is managed, and finally, how SOLAS is keeping up with some very modern threats.
Okay, first things first. How do we actually know a ship is safe? I mean, who checks? That's where Chapter I comes in. It sets up the entire system of verification. Before any ship can head out on an international voyage, it has to prove, without a doubt, that it meets the SOLAS standards through a whole series of really tough surveys and inspections. You can think of Chapter I as the convention's muscle, its enforcement arm. It lays out all the required surveys, the initial one, the annual ones, and the big renewal survey every few years. But here's the key part. It gives the countries as ship visits, what we call port states, the authority to inspect foreign ships to make sure they're playing by the rules. So yeah, this is the chapter that gives SOLAS its teeth.
And how does a ship prove it passed all these tests? With paper. Lots of it. These certificates are basically the ship's passport. A passenger ship safety certificate on a cruise ship, for example, is the official stamp of approval saying it's fit to sail under SOLAS, and you better believe these have to be on board at all times, ready for an inspector to see. Now let's get to the ship itself. See, safety isn't something you just bolt on at the end. It has to be built in right from the moment the first piece of steel is laid. Chapters 2.1 and 2.2 are really the engineering core of SOLAS, dealing with the ship's structure, its stability, its machinery, and its defenses against the #1 threat at sea, fire. Chapter 2-1 is all about making sure the ship is fundamentally strong and stable. It dictates how the ship has to be divided up into watertight compartments so that if the hull gets breached, flooding is contained. That's a direct lesson learned from the Titanic. It also covers all the machinery and electrical systems, and, reflecting how safety standards evolve, it includes a complete ban on any new installations of asbestos. This chapter is literally the blueprint for a resilient vessel. Okay, Chapter 2.2 is fascinating because of how it thinks about the problem. A ship in the middle of the ocean is completely on its own. You can't just dial 911 for the fire department. A fire on board is one of the most terrifying things a sailor can face. So this chapter lays out incredibly specific requirements for preventing fires, for detecting them early with alarms, and for putting them out, detailing the exact firefighting gear needed for every single space on that ship. And this right here shows you how SOLAS works. The convention sets the big rules, but then it points to these super detailed, mandatory codes for the nitty-gritty technical stuff. For instance, if a ship runs on a modern fuel like LNG, it has to follow the IGF code. Its fire extinguishers and sprinkler systems, they have to meet the standards in the Fire Safety Systems Code, or FSS code. And the special walls that stop fire from spreading, they have to be tested according to the Fire Test Procedures, or FTP code.
A safe ship is so much more than just strong steel, right? It's about the people on board and the systems they rely on to do their jobs and stay out of trouble. So now, we're going to shift our focus to the human side of safety, which is covered in Chapters 3, 4, and 5. These are all about life-saving, communications, and navigation.
Chapter 3 is essentially your plan B. When everything has gone wrong, these are the rules that save your life. It spells out every piece of life-saving gear that has to be on board, from having a life jacket for every single person to the lifeboats and life rafts you need to get away from a sinking ship. But just as important, it mandates the procedures, the muster lists, and the constant emergency drills that make sure everyone knows exactly what to do when that alarm goes off.
It wasn't that long ago that a ship in trouble could just disappear, vanish without a trace. Chapter 4 changed all that by creating the GMDSS, the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System. And this is way more than just a radio. It's a worldwide integrated network that uses satellites and land-based systems. The whole point is to guarantee that a distress signal can be sent and received automatically from anywhere on Earth, which drastically increases the chances of a successful rescue.
Of course, the best way to survive a disaster is to not get into one in the first place. And that's exactly what Chapter V is all about. It dictates the navigation equipment ships have to carry, like radar and the Automatic Identification System, AIS, which lets ships see each other on a screen. It also demands proper voyage planning, using up-to-date charts, and requires ships to carry crucial books like the IMSAR manual, which is the International Guide for Search and Rescue.
All right, let's talk about what's actually inside the ship. A vessel's safety is totally intertwined with the cargo it's carrying. It doesn't matter if it's a load of grain, barrels of chemicals, or even nuclear material. SOLAS has specific rules to manage those risks, and they're mostly found in Chapters 6, 7, and 8. So, Chapter VI covers the basics for all types of cargo, making sure everything is loaded and tied down correctly so it doesn't shift around in a storm and mess with the ship's stability. Chapter VII then takes it a step further, laying down really strict rules for carrying things classified as dangerous goods. And Chapter VIII deals with the very unique challenges of nuclear-powered ships because, well, the potential hazards there are on a whole other level.
For anything dangerous, the key thing to know is the IMDG code, the International Maritime Dangerous Goods Code. Chapter 7 makes this code mandatory. It's the global handbook for mariners. It classifies all the dangerous stuff, says exactly how it has to be packed, labeled, and stored to prevent accidents, and gives clear step-by-step instructions for emergencies. It's an absolutely essential tool for protecting the crew, the ship, and the ocean itself.
Because of their power source and the materials they might be carrying, nuclear ships are really in a class of their own. Chapter 8 requires them to go through very specialized surveys and to carry one of two special certificates, either a nuclear passenger ship or a nuclear cargo ship safety certificate. These actually replace the standard certificates that conventional ships have to carry.
The world is always changing, and SOLAS has to change with it. Just as different cargoes have different risks, the act of sailing itself is evolving. This last group of chapters we're going to look at shows just how the convention adapts to new challenges, from maritime security to sailing in the most extreme places on Earth.
Chapters XI-1 and XI-2, for example, were created to deal with modern security threats like terrorism and piracy. They make the ISPS code mandatory. Chapter 14 brought in the Polar Code, which has super tough rules for any ship tough enough to operate in the Arctic or Antarctic. And the newest one, Chapter 15, adds safety rules for ships carrying industrial personnel. Think of the technicians heading out to work on offshore wind farms. They're not crew, and they're not really passengers, so they needed their own set of safety rules.
So if you take away just one thing from all this, let it be this. SOLAS is not some static set of rules that was written down once and then forgotten. Not at all. It's a dynamic, constantly evolving framework. It's always looking ahead, always incorporating new technology and lessons learned from past incidents, all to make sure the global rulebook for safety at sea stays relevant for generations to come.
Which leaves us with a pretty cool question to think about. With autonomous ships on the horizon, new green fuels being developed, and offshore industries booming, the whole idea of risk at sea is changing again. So, what do you think the next chapter of SOLAS is going to look like? What new challenges will it have to solve to keep up its vital mission in protecting life at sea?